In this video, we're going to be completing the square, factoring, and then solving for x. Let's refresh our memories on what the steps are for completing the square. If we have an a value that is not 1, then as a pre-step you need to divide everything by the a, or factor it out. Then you write plus, leave a space in the c spot, divide the b value by 2, square the answer from step 2, and then write the answer from step 3 in the c's spot. Now remember, that's just for the completing the square portion. Let's go back to our examples. In our first example, we have x squared plus 12x equals 8. And so notice that this time we actually have a c value, which we haven't really had in some of our previous videos. And so something that's important to note is that we want the c value on the other side of the equal sign. So we want it to be away from the a and the b, which in this example is what we have. So that's perfect. That's exactly what we need. We want the 8 over there. So to do this problem, we're going to go ahead and let's rewrite that with our leave a space. So x squared plus 12x plus leave a space equals 8. Now remember, whatever you do to the left side, you also have to do to the right side to keep it a balanced equation. That's what that equal sign means. So we also need to put a plus, leave a space on the other side. Now our steps are still the same. We're going to take that 12, which is our b value, and divide it by 2, which gives us a 6. Then we're going to square that, which is going to give us an answer of 36. And so this number is going to go into both of our leave a space spots. There we go. So plus 36 plus 36. Now it asked us to complete the square. And that's what happened right there. So it's been completed. The square has been completed. We're super close. Now we're ready to factor. So if we're writing this in factored form, then we're going to have the x. Then we look for the number that we squared, which in this case was a positive 6, which will then square equals. Now, what do we set that equal to? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to actually add that 8 plus 36, and that's the number that we're going to drop in right there. So we're going to plop in that 44 right there. And so now we've written it factored. So this is it factored right there. Okay, so we're in factored form there. But now we're not finished, because now we're going to solve for x. So what we need to do now is get the x by itself. So the first step is going to be to get rid of that square. So in order to do that, we're going to square root both sides. When we square root both sides, that's going to leave us, because the square root and the square will cancel out. So that will leave us with our x plus 6 equals, and we need to see if the square root of 44 will reduce. So we're going to move some stuff so we have a little more room. We're going to take this x plus 6 and we're going to move it. So we're going to go x plus 6 equals. So let's go ahead and let's simplify our 44 right now. So we're going to go ahead and break that down. I'm going to get a 4 and an 11. And an 11 is a prime number. And a 4 is a 2 and a 2. So this should be a 2 radical 11. And so we're going to take this and put this in that spot. But remember, when we take the square root of something, then it gives us a positive answer and a negative answer. So sure, I'll have a 2 square root of 11 here, but I also need to have an x plus 6 equals a negative. Let's do that with orange. Negative 2 radical 11 as well. From here, I will then subtract 6 from both sides, which will leave me with x equals, let me write that in a different color. Let's write it all in blue. So we're going to have x equals negative 6 plus a 2 radical 11, and that's going to be one of our solutions. Then we'll subtract 6 from the other side and get x equals a negative 6 minus 2 radical 11, and that will be our second answer. And we are now finished with our problem because we completed the square so that we could factor it in order to solve for x. Let's go ahead and do letter B together. Or actually, no, let's have you do letter B on your own. So go ahead and push pause and then work out that problem. And then when you're done, push play and let's see if you were correct. You should have begun by setting it up as x squared plus 14x plus leave a space equals negative 4 plus leave a space. Then taking that 14 and divided it by 2 to get a 7. Squared the 7 to get a 49, which you then put into the 2 leave a spaces. Then we're going to write it in factored form. Factored form should have given you an x plus 7 quantity squared equals 45, and the 7 we got from the number that we squared. Then we were ready to solve. So there you should have square rooted both sides, which allows us to take the x plus 7 and split that for our two answers. And we'll break down the 45. So we're going to use a 5 and a 9. And 5 is prime, and 9 is a 3 and a 3. And so this will become a 3 radical 5. So we'll put our positive 3 radical 5 and our negative 3 radical 5, and then we'll solve. So we subtract 7 from both sides, leaving us with x equals negative 7 plus the 3 radical 5 as our first solution, and then subtracting 7 from our second problem as x equals negative 7 minus 3 radical 5 as our second solution. Let's take a look at letter C together, because in this instance we see that our C value isn't really where it needs to be, because remember we want our C value away from the A value. So we're going to need to change that. We need to move the C over. So we're just going to go ahead and add our 2. Choose a different color. There we go. Plus 2. So we're going to move that to the other side, which is going to leave us with x squared minus 11x. And we're just going to go ahead and do our plus leave a space right now as we're rewriting this, equals our 2, and then plus the leave a space. Then we'll take our b value of negative 11 and divide it by 2, which is negative 11 over 2. Then we square that, which gives us a value of 121 over 4. So we're going to go ahead and plug that in to our leave a spaces. When we're writing this in factored form, that's going to give us x minus 11 over 2, because that's the number that we squared. Quantity squared equals, remember we're going to add 2 plus 121 over 4, which is going to give us 129 over 4. And now we're going to solve. So we'll take the square root of each side, which is going to give us an x minus 11 over 2 equals, and another x minus 11 over 2 equals. And then we're going to need to simplify our radical 129 over 4. So remember that we can split this apart. The square root of 129 over the square root of 4, which is the square root of 129 over 2. So we just need to break apart our 129. So let's do that right here. So the square root of 129 can be broken apart with a 3 and a 43. And each of those are prime numbers, so we can't break down 129. So that means we're going to have a positive 129 over 2, and in the bottom a negative radical 129 over 2. And now we just need to solve. So we're going to add 11 over 2 to both sides. And because, let's just move this down a little bit so we have enough room. Because 11 over 2 doesn't have a radical, we're able to write our final answer as x equals 11 over 2 plus the square root of 129 over 2. And that's our first solution. For our bottom problem, we'll add, again, 11 over 2, which is going to give us x equals 11 over 2 minus the square root of 129 over 2. And that is our final answer. So let's have you try letter D on your own. So go ahead and push pause, and when you're done, push play, and let's see if you were correct. You should begin by adding 6 to both sides. Then you'll need your plus leave a space on both sides, then dividing the b by 2, and then squaring that solution, and then putting that answer in both of the leave a spaces. Then writing it in factored form. We're using our negative 8 because that was the number we squared, is the number we bring down. And now we're in factored form, and now we're ready to solve. So you square root both sides to get rid of the square. And it just so happens that the square root of 64 is the number 8. So you have x minus 8 equals 8, and you'll have x minus 8 equals negative 8. Solving both sides, so we'll add 8 to both sides here, which will give us an x equals 16 for our first solution. Then adding 8 here will give us an x equals 0 for our second solution, and we're done. So that is how to complete the square, factor, and then solve for x.